Hi, Thriller Recaps here. Today, I am going to explain the movie, The Old Guard. Please like and subscribe if you enjoy this. In a quiet Moroccan alley, a man on a powerful motorcycle encounters a woman dressed in all black. She gives him a book that fills him with joy, leading him to offer her a job. On their way to a hotel to meet with the rest of the team, she skillfully removes any photos tourists took of her to maintain her secrecy. At the hotel, her teammates persuasively convince her to consider the job, and she agrees to hear the client's proposal. Following Booker, she meets a man named Copley, who explains that students have been abducted by militias in a crisis that needs urgent resolution. She accepts the mission, and together with her team, they travel to South Sudan. Under the cover of night, they infiltrate the location where the captive children are being held, ready to take action. They planted a bomb on a closed door adorned with many children's shoes and descended a staircase to a basement, finding it eerily empty. Just as suspicion grew, armed men suddenly ambushed them, unleashing a deadly hail of bullets. Yet, a bewildering twist occurred as they woke up, the bullets miraculously falling from their wounds and healing instantly. They retaliated, swiftly eliminating their attackers. While searching for the kidnapped girls, they discovered hidden cameras, unraveling a sinister setup. Watching video footage of their deaths and revivals in terror, they buried their blood-stained attire. She hinted at Copley's knowledge of their true nature. Meanwhile, in Afghanistan, the U.S. military paraded, and Officer Nile and her team were dispatched to extract information from a man. After coercing the information, they stormed the man's room, but when the officer in charge shot him, threatening their mission to keep him alive, he slashed her throat. Another officer desperately applied pressure to the wound, urgently calling for assistance. On a train, Andy and her team, along with the officer in Afghanistan, suddenly wake up from unsettling visions of the near-death experience of the Afghan officer. Perplexed, the team discusses the officer's identity, with Andy revealing she's a Marine officer. After a heated debate with her team, Andy leaps from the train in pursuit of the Marine officer. Meanwhile, in London, Copley meets with Stephen Merrick, presenting footage of Andy and her team's inexplicable resurrection. Stephen urges Copley to provide solid evidence swiftly, fearing his competitors might discover the truth. In Afghanistan, the other officers keep their distance from Nile, who miraculously revived after her apparent death. Her superior informs her of further tests, despite her assurance that she feels fine. While trying to calm herself with music and await transportation, Andy ambushes and incapacitates two officers sent to retrieve the Marine officer, rendering her unconscious. Andy drives through a desert, blasting music, while Nile awakens in the car's trunk, kicking her way out, and tumbling onto the sandy terrain. Andy halts and approaches Nile, shooting her when she attempts to flee. Shockingly, Nile revives after a moment, stunned to learn Andy shot her in the head. Andy discloses that she leads an unkillable army of warriors. They head to a plane, and as Nile questions their destination, Andy reveals it's Paris. Nile accuses Andy of associating with the wrong crowd, to which Andy defends herself, claiming it's only when necessary. After offering Nile a change of clothes and suggesting she rest, Nile wakes up to find herself tied up, facing a gun-wielding pilot instructed by Nile to land the plane. Andy, seemingly shot by Nile, takes control of the situation, shooting the pilot and requesting Nile's assistance in flying the plane. However, Nile soon realizes she fell for Andy's ruse, leading to a fierce confrontation between the two. Upon their arrival in France, Nile is taken aback when she learns the true age of her immortal team members. They explain that although they can't die, they remain uncertain about how to end their immortality. One night, Nile awakens in terror, startling her fellow immortals. She shares her recurring dream of a woman trapped in a submerged metal coffin, drowning repeatedly. The team identifies the woman as Gwyn, the first immortal warrior who discovered Andy. Together, Andy and Gwyn aided people in numerous battles, only to be falsely accused of witchcraft. They were subjected to hanging, which they survived, leading to their imprisonment. Tragically, Gwyn was separated from Andy and placed in a coffin, as their captors believed it was the only way to eliminate them. They reveal to Niall that Gwyn was cast into the ocean to perish, and since Andy's escape, she has tirelessly searched for her, haunted by guilt over her inability to save her. Niall empathizes with Gwyn's anguish and fury. Overwhelmed, she steps out of the room to clear her thoughts. Andy follows, but Niall expresses her reluctance to be part of it all, and Andy insists she has no choice. Suddenly, a loud noise sends them rushing back inside to discover their house in ruins. Booker lies lifeless in a chair with a grave wound, prompting Andy to slap him awake. Copley instructs his men to retrieve the missing team members, only to learn they took 2 captives. Andy orders Niall and Booker to wait for her signal as she ventures to rescue the others. Niall is stunned by the carnage Andy has left in her wake, as she single-handedly dispatches numerous adversaries. Meanwhile, on a plane surrounded by armed men, Joe expresses his love for Nikki. Upon landing, Copley is astonished to find all the armed men dead, and Joe and Nikki are transported onto another aircraft. In France, Andy leads Niall to a concealed cave where she stores her belongings, instructing Booker to track down Copley, who still holds Joe and Nikki captive. Meanwhile, in London, Joe and Nikki are brought to Stephen's office, where he stabs Joe's neck to confirm his rapid healing abilities. A doctor forcibly extracts blood samples from them for Stephen's experiment. In the cave, Andy notices her wound still bleeding and departs, citing the need to go outside. Curious, Niall questions Booker about Andy's age, to which he admits he doesn't know because it's been an eternity. He reveals that it took a long time before Andy found someone like Niall. Booker confides in Niall about his 3 sons, with the youngest passing away at 42 from cancer. He shares the agony of witnessing loved ones age and die while remaining eternally young. While at the supermarket, Andy requests the cashier to use the restroom, but she's informed there isn't one, only a storage room. The kind cashier helps Andy tend to her wound, applying a bandage and advising her to get stitches. Andy expresses her gratitude. In her car, Andy reflects on a past team member's death. Copley is astonished to learn that Stephen intends to keep Joe and Nikki for an extended period, despite having obtained samples from them. Niall experiences another nightmare and finds Andy outside with her phone. During an emotional conversation, Booker joins them, announcing a discovery in London. The trio heads to London, with Booker scouting the area first. Niall initially refuses the gun Andy offers her, expressing her reluctance to participate. After Andy persuades her, she grants Niall the choice to stay behind. Midway, Niall decides to ditch the weapons, discovering they're empty. Inside the house, Andy is heartbroken as she realizes Booker has betrayed them. Copley and Booker notice Andy's lack of healing abilities and desperately attempt to keep her alive. Stephen takes them to his lab, seeking answers for Andy's halted healing. Meanwhile, Niall returns to the house and encounters an injured Copley, who is astonished to learn she is an immortal warrior. She demands to know the whereabouts of her team, and after some threats, he finally reveals their location. Copley shares stories of Andy's heroic deeds spanning many years, recounting how she dedicated her life to saving others. Amidst the confusion, Copley inadvertently discusses why Andy's immortality suddenly ceased. He grants Niall access to Stephen's lab, and she instructs him to depart, receiving an access card as he wishes her good luck. Niall successfully infiltrates the lab, where Stephen recognizes her immortality. Seizing Andy's discarded axe, Stephen becomes a threat. Niall frees her team, and together they defend Andy, shielding her from harm. Fueled by frustration, Andy decides to embark on a solo mission to confront Stephen, determined to unravel the mystery surrounding her lost immortality. Outside the door where Stephen and his men await, Andy and Niall have a conversation. Niall urges Andy to follow her lead to avoid death, but Andy maintains that when one's time comes, little can be done. Stephen and his men anxiously prepare to attack as they anticipate the warriors' entry. Unexpectedly, Joe surprises them by flying in through a window, and the team confronts Stephen's henchmen in a fierce battle. Amidst their discussion, Steven threatens to kill Andy, labeling her as selfish. In a cunning move, they distract him, enabling Andy to deliver a fatal blow with her axe to his neck. Niall leaps out of the window with Steven, ensuring his demise. The warriors depart the scene before attracting attention and gather at a bar, where Niall reveals she fabricated her death in combat to her family. Andy assigns Booker a 100-year exile as punishment for his betrayal before reuniting with the team in the same spot. The rest of the team visits Copley's house, where Andy proposes they take on jobs that offer invincibility and protection. He gladly accepts. 6 months later in Paris, a disheveled and sorrowful Booker returns home to find his door ajar. Inside, a mysterious woman in red greets him by name, hinting at a potential sequel to the story.